Censorship is an almost universally frowned upon aspect of cable television. Just about everyone hates it. And aside from the uncomfortably large percentage of hardcore conservatives who think the Owl House is satanic, most of us can agree that it's better when a creator isn't given limitations by the network in what they can do. We want to see imaginative worlds built by genius minds, a boundless creative spirit that transcends the TV screen and truly immerses us in the story, pulling us in with every twist and turn. This is why we keep coming back to television and movies time and time again for over a century now. But what if I were to tell you that without this censorship that everyone villainizes, we would almost never see these artists' imaginations come to life on the screen? Then not only can censorship be a positive force within the industry, but that without it, most of your favorite media would probably suck. To do this, I will need to answer the question at the heart of this video. Why do I, a 21-year-old man, love children's cartoons so damn much? Before I get into the good, however, let's take a minute to talk about the bad. I recently watched a video regarding the Owl House, and in it were two major points. One, that the concepts of witchcraft were evil, and much more importantly, two, that the depiction of an explicitly homosexual relationship between two leads is sinful, wrong, and is poisonous to the minds of young children. Yikes. To most of us, this is an outlandish claim. Of course, we don't want our kids to be shown sexually explicit content, but the claim that homosexuality is inherently sexual, which is the case being made from these kinds of people, is, well, really fucking stupid. There is nothing more sexual about a wholesome gay relationship between two young teens as there is with two teens in an equally wholesome but heterosexual relationship. It's really all just a twisted justification for homophobia that weaponizes children, and most of us rightfully see that as wrong. But here's the kicker. That channel that made the video has 37,000 subscribers. The video itself is 181,000 views at the time of this writing, and while the like to dislike ratio is absurdly disproportionate, it still has likes in the thousands. It's clear that this channel, and thus this viewpoint on media, is something that is agreed upon by a substantial group of people. Individuals who limit what their children watch and inevitably what merchandise their kids will ask for, to such a degree that executives are extremely wary of losing this market by adding something like a homosexual relationship into their series. This is censorship that is solely based on making the most consumable, inoffensive product possible to appeal to the widest audience. Such censorship is not what I'm talking about when I say it can do good. All this type does is alienate parents and children who may need a character they can relate to, and is based on evangelical and conservative values that, quite frankly, have no place in deciding what goes on television. Thankfully, although this audience still holds a significant place in corporate decisions, their power is seemingly dwindling as more and more shows break new ground in areas deemed wrong by these people, such as the aforementioned Owl House and LGBTQ+ representation in children's media. And before anyone brings it up, no, the Owl House was not canceled due to censorship from everything we know. When it's boiled down, censorship is really just a limitation placed on a creator. A great example would be, say, someone wants to make a TV show on Disney Channel. They then can also have an episode that revolves around impregnating an alien sex robot. While a surprising amount of shows manage to skirt the line a bit and throw in low-key jokes and references for the grown-ups in the room, they still have to respect that line's existence, while the creators of Rick and Morty can go much, much further with a joke. And that can seem a little frustrating to a lot of creators out there. One of the worst things someone can tell us is that we aren't allowed to create the exact image we saw in our heads. But we can take comfort in knowing that, well, the full picture we imagined is probably not as great as we think it is. This is kind of a strange example, but sometimes after having a particularly bizarre dream, I know I just have to write it down before I forget, knowing this is going to be the story that sends my writing career to the cosmos. So I write it down as coherently as I can, then scroll through YouTube or Twitter until I inevitably forget about it completely an hour later. When I eventually find it later on, sometimes even months or years after the fact, two things become apparent. Firstly, that the story quite literally makes no fucking sense, and secondly, that fact is absolutely hilarious. To prove my point, I'll read aloud a dream that I found unedited just for this video. A story that I wrote down for the explicit reason of someday getting it published. There is a disaster in town, so everyone flees away. But I know better and go to an area where nobody will to avoid the more future chaos. That's a sentence. It's down a country road, but we take the left and come across a hill that looks like it will lead to a scenic route. With time to kill, I drive up to it, but realize there's a barn up there to prevent visitors. I then notice the house on the right, and this kinda crazy woman comes out and tells us to go away, and that we scared her daughter. I go into the house alone with the woman to make amends, and though she is very angry and distrustful at first, she eventually shows me some good stuff she has, like a flying remote control thing, which I tell her is actually really cool. She begins to warm up to me and eventually shows me her Pokemon movie collection, which is massive. While I'm admiring it, I notice she has a Sword Art Online collection. I figure she used to watch it back in the day and still has it, but I notice she has Alicization and that the collection is worth a lot. I comment how I'm surprised she still watches the show, and she visibly flinches at my words. I then reassure her that I find it really cool, and she brightens up once more. After having been in the house for a while, she's at the kitchen sink doing dishes, and reveals she wants to have sex with me. Then things get even weirder as she has a husband but is apparently still a virgin, while he knowingly sleeps with other women. Her husband comes home and I pretend to be a Christian, so he deemed me fit to take his wife's virginity. While we're planning this, the 2 children are home and the 16-year-old boy comes into the kitchen where I am alone. Not knowing he's in on it too, I hide in the closet and put a fur coat in front of me to conceal myself. But he quickly sees through it. Apparently he's in on the plan and is all for it, so he came to deliver a message that the woman is ready. I have trouble finding the room and eventually find someone I know in a family type room on the 2nd floor smoking, who gives me tips on finding the room while I joke about being atheist. Finally, I locate the right room and gently open the door. But what do I find inside? There is an abnormally large man gagged and tied up in a BDSM outfit. I walk in, see this, and immediately say nope and walk out. Apparently, the husband thought I would like that, and the woman takes all the stuff off as I call in Shaquille O'Neal via helicopter, and we laugh about it. The end. So, yeah. That's something I legitimately thought was worthy of being written into an actual short story, and then published. I don't really remember writing it, but I can say with absolute confidence that I had no fucking clue what I was even talking about. This is obviously a pretty extreme example, and I only really included it because I thought it was funny, but it does go to show that ideas that sound great in our heads one moment can be viewed as an incoherent mess when you're actually expressing it to an audience. Even with stories I conjure up while actually being conscious, I often find that the initial idea requires a few rewrites to make it publish-worthy. And yes, a lot of these changes are self-made, but many of them are not. While in college, I had to write numerous stories and poems, and the guidelines and specific rules that the instructors gave me often led to my best work as I tried to think up ways to creatively weave around those limitations to create the most unique product I could. I was outright told in a film writing class that my main character and premise were too uninteresting, and that I needed to add more. And in doing so within the guidelines, I created whole new characters and concepts that I never would have thought of if my original idea was greenlit, which made the story 10 times better. Limitation is ultimately what breeds creativity. I've heard it said from multiple professional sources that if a person was given $1 billion to make whatever movie they desired, it would most likely come out a mess. We need to have places that we can't go to, so that we discover 1 million more around it that we never saw before. The most fun process for me whenever I'm creating is evaluating my current limitations, usually technical or financial, and determining how I can overcome them to make the best product I can. When I do so, I find that the solution I eventually come up with is far better than what I had initially envisioned in my head. The creative process fundamentally needs limitations, because those are what form the foundations that all media is built upon. The story for my dream wouldn't even make it as a cheap 90s porno VHS collecting dust in the corner of Talk of the Town. If you know, you know. Let alone the grand masterpiece that would win me the Oscar that I had envisioned. Now, if I were to sit down and be told that I need to make this story into a PG-13 rated summer flick for young couples at the theater, well, it'd almost certainly still be shit, but at least it wouldn't have people questioning my sanity. It desperately needs the limitation of censorship. So I think it should be obvious by now why I think censorship can be a good thing. It serves as a limitation that creators need to uniquely skirt around and often can result in a better overall product. But of course, not all censorship is good. Even when not as extreme as my Owl House example, creators really can have great ideas that end up getting shut down. It sucks. But I believe the good that comes with it ultimately beats out the bad. And yeah, too much censorship can lead to bland, unoriginal shit that tries to appeal to the largest common denominator, but I'd actually argue that most Western adult animation already does this without much censorship. And that leads into our next point, how children's cartoons can thrive within these unique limitations that adult television lacks. So herein lies the question. Why does animation made for kids entertain me so much? Of course, there will always be the nostalgia factor, but I'm not referencing shows or movies that I loved as a kid, or even media that calls back to such times through references and similarities. I love those things, of course, but for this video, I'm specifically talking about my love for children's media outside of those boundaries. Stuff that feels unique and fresh, the kind of shit that I've never seen before. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for this, but I believe the truth lies with the fact that it is specifically made for children, and thus must have significant censorship. Theoretically, a writer on any given Family Guy episode could create basically any joke that they want. Of course, they have some boundaries, but if they say want to make the baby have murderous intentions, they can do that. There are very few topics they can't fully dive into, which is drastically different from the writers on a children's show. The latter can't just make any joke that they want or feature any plot point that comes to mind. And while that freedom of choice in the former can certainly be a good thing, it can also lead to something detrimental to their series: lazy writing. Once a show has made every sex joke feasibly imaginable, they tend to repeat the same humor and basic story structures that led to their success. Basically, they become extremely formulaic. This can be seen with the aforementioned Family Guy, and I shouldn't even have to tell you how cookie-cutter Western adult animation has become recently. I honestly can't tell this shit apart anymore. The truly great series have unique ways to keep them fresh. South Park is the prime example of that, but not everyone is Matt Stone and Trey Parker. 98% of media out there is pretty shit, and it doesn't help when the show's writers don't have to push past boundaries and can keep making the same penis joke over and over. But you know who can't make an explicit penis joke every episode? The writers over at the Owl House. They are consistently hit with limitations since day one, as TV made for children rightfully experiences much more censorship. This births an innate creativity that becomes the foundation of the series. They have to try harder to get a viewer's attention, and the limitation placed in the jokes they're allowed to make forces the writers to really sit down and think about acceptable jokes that can still elicit laughs from both children and adults. This generally leads to much more creative humor, as every joke told has a lot more intention behind it than the intrusive thoughts and images that Big Mouth counts as comedy. And when the writers are able to sneak in an adult joke past the censors, like the alcohol love potion joke in Gumball's episode, The Matchmaker, it's inherently much funnier than if the same joke were made in even something great like South Park, just because we know it's really not supposed to be there. This isn't to say that children's cartoons are always better than those made for adults, or that I even necessarily prefer them. I mean, my channel identity is derived from Evangelion, an anime which no child should be watching. Rather, cartoons like The Owl House, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, The Amazing World of Gumball, and much more hold a special place in my heart, right next to anime and other adult animations. And yes, while I do tend to connect to stories that are more adult-oriented, I believe the inherent censorship, when taken in acceptable doses of children's media, can propel that medium to a level comparable to the adult animations I generally prefer more. Another factor that contributes to this is the fact that if a creator pitches an idea to Disney Channel, they will most likely have to work harder to get their show approved for syndication. This means that the creators that do push through along with their ideas are often more filtered than other mediums, and that they have an extreme earnest passion for their art they wish to make a reality. The Owl House is proof of this. And all of these compliments aren't just limited to the comedy. We've all experienced a scene in a kid's show where everything suddenly gets super serious and emotional, and the whiplash-like impact that gives us is way harsher than it is for adult TV, as it contrasts with the otherwise bright atmosphere. I call this the oh shit moment, and the only Western adult cartoon that I can think of that has these is BoJack Horseman, which is, of course, a series at the absolute peak of fiction. Let me put this all more simply. I'd say 98% of media out there, regardless of genre or medium, is mediocre at best. It's usually extremely uninteresting. That's just how it is. However, if I were to look at something I dearly love like anime, I'd honestly say that number is closer to 99%. While I do enjoy a lot of that trash to be sure, anime is a medium that, by its highly merchandised nature, is tailor-made to be formulaic and on constant repeat. I'd probably say the same of Western adult animation, which, while less merchandised, attempts to appeal to the masses in a way that produces the same uninteresting jokes over and over. Like, I think we can all agree that so much of what the medium has to offer is pretty shit. But when it comes to kids' cartoons, I'd say the number is actually closer to 96%, maybe even lower. And I think that is directly tied to the fact that the creators of these shows need to put a lot more thought and time into not even just the jokes that they make, but also the storylines and emotional beats. They can't afford to be formulaic, because then the adult demographic that makes up a decent size of their audience won't even give it the time of day. And it should be obvious, if a parent likes the Owl House, they'd be more likely to buy that King plushie that their child is begging for. Shit, maybe they'd even buy one for themselves. Or at the very least, these parents would be more prone to keep Disney Channel on or subscribe to Disney Plus if they can enjoy the show with their kid. If only Disney knew how to actually merchandise their popular TV shows, and they'd be making a fortune. Count the amount of children's cartoons that you love to this day, regardless of pure nostalgia, while I do mine. The Owl House, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Gravity Falls, The Amazing World of Gumball, Avatar: The Last Airbender, the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, early My Little Pony, Teen Titans, the few great episodes of Teen Titans Go, My Life as a Teenage Robot, Regular Show, Looney Tunes, Lilo and Stitch, Adventure Time, and the list goes on and on and on. I probably even forgot a few of your favorites and some of mine. Now think of the Western adult animation you consider great. I got South Park, some Family Guy, BoJack Horseman, Rick and Morty, Futurama, RWBY, and a few more. While there are a lot of gems of adult animation I'm forgetting, for me at least, the numbers don't really even compare to the amount of kids shows I like. Of course, this all comes down to personal preference. I'm not really saying that either medium is inherently better than the other. Rather, I hope I've made my point that I find children's cartoons to generally be more creative and funny because, well, censorship pretty much forced them to be. And I think this is best seen with the animation. Like, yeah, BoJack Horseman is probably the best written show of all time, but its animation is usually not something to write home about aside from a few genius sequences. Now compare that to The Amazing World of Gumball, and, well, it's really not even close. And I like BoJack more than Gumball, but it might shock you that I watch animated shows primarily for the animation. Crazy, I know. In fact, very few of the Western adult animated shows I mentioned have animation that really stands out, aside from maybe RWBY and South Park. Honestly, most of them don't even really have to be animated, and with some tweaking could work serviceably enough in live action. But try having the greatest seasons of SpongeBob in live action? Yeah, I didn't think so. I love animation made for every demographic. anime, adult western, indie projects on YouTube, foreign short films, and more. They all have their own place in my heart. But children's cartoons, while not being targeted at my age group, remain one of my favorites. And if they weren't forced to creatively work around some censorship, I don't think they would be. I hope I've made it clear why that is, especially since censorship is almost universally considered a negative in the media realm. Which, yeah, it usually deserves that reputation, but it can sometimes lead to some great limitations. And anyone who themselves creates knows that such limitations are the main driving force behind their own creativity. A spark that shines through the best with cartoons made for children. And that is why I, as a 21-year-old man, love them so much. If you've made it this far, then I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed the video and that it's given you a new perspective. I know a lot of people love cartoons as much as I do, even more so, but just may not be able to place exactly why that is. I hope I've given you some clarity. If you're already a fan of the channel, you'll notice that I've been away for a bit. I spent a week in Disney World, and that trip is what sparked the strong desire to make this video. I have a lot more ideas I want to share on cartoons, so there's a lot more to come. If you like this video, then be sure to subscribe to see all of that. And while you're down there, I'd really appreciate it if you could boost this video in the algorithm by hitting the like button. It seriously helps out a ton. And as for my current subscribers, I'm still working on the second part of my Doki Doki Literature Club series. To be frank, I wanted to have it done weeks ago, but, well, talking on the crushing existential horror of the universe is a bit mentally straining, to say the least. While I still enjoy making such videos, sometimes I need a pick-me-up or two to perk up my mood. A topic that's a bit less serious. I'm sorry for taking so long on it, but it is something I want to see through to the end. So I will do everything I can to finish it in the next couple of weeks. Please look forward to that and for all the videos to come. And, as always, thank you for watching.